I followed an inner guidance, and now I've learned to trust that there is something deeper within each and every one. You and I and everyone who watches and listens to this, there is something deeper. Now, the religious books would say the still small voice. And that's true. While Emerson called it your over soul, Paul Brunton calls it your over self. So there is this deeper part. But if we're not aware of it, if we don't look to make contact, nothing happens.
Stephen, thank you for your time and welcome to the show. And you're sitting in your absolutely fantastic rendered fake screen of a library, which is actually amazingly these days a real library full of, I think you said, 14,000 books plus 30,000 PDFs or something.
Yes.
Crazy.
No, again, even though I mentioned it earlier, I just want to say it again. I never take these interviews for granted. Paul, I want to thank you for allowing me to share with your audience. And this backdrop that is real, this is why I like doing this. There's 52,000 items dating back to 1075, and they would just be books on a shelf unless the information comes out or goes out. So that's why I appreciate this opportunity.
Just out of absolute interest, how many of those books or titles would you say are sort of lost relics these days? I mean, I can imagine, like, what's still it's impossible to answer. What number of those roughly would you take a guess at would still be in circulation, that knowledge still be in circulation?
You know, I would tend to think, because I'll tell you my standard joke. If somebody comes to me and says, have you read this book? And I'll say, was the author born after 1940? And they'll go, well, yes. And I'll say, I haven't read it. I specialize in the ancient, in the back, in the overlooked, the forgotten, the misplaced materials. And so a good majority of this material is coming from the ancient mystery schools, wisdom. And even though there are some people who say, oh, no, I'm talking about the wisdom schools and I'm sharing that information, quite frankly, in my opinion, they are not. They really don't understand. People tend today to gather things from another internet site and then they share that information. When I was young, there was a game called Telephone in elementary school. The teacher would line up 30 students and whisper in one kid's ear. And by the time it came out, it was garbly-goop. And in my opinion, especially as a glorified librarian, people have just been altering and spreading information. And I've attempted to have as much source material as possible so people can go back and look and then make their own opinions and decisions.
It strikes me as one of the pitfalls of modernity or modern people's, I'm going to say in the last 100 years since, say, the Industrial Revolution, that we look back upon the past as, because of technology, for example, we make an assumption that people didn't know much in the past. Because of, look at how advanced we are with our buildings, our cars, our computers.
Right.
And if anything, I'd say when you start, in my somewhat limited delving back into the texts I've read from those time periods, it's almost like how much have we lost in terms of our knowledge base from the past. These people, do you think these people were stupid? Like, oh my God.
You know, I feel so fortunate. You're lobbing easy softball questions to me and statements because I've often said, just because we have fast computers and fast cars does not mean we are any wiser than the ancients. You know, I did a query 2 days ago. When was the first mention anywhere in philosophy where color therapy was mentioned? And out came Heliopolis 4,000 years ago. They were using color. In Pythagoras' time, they knew the distance from the Earth to the moon within half a kilometer. The ancient Chinese mapped out the entire acupuncture meridian system 4,000 years
Mm.
ago. So I love what you just brought up. Again, I've attempted to keep around the older material because, again, a lot of it was pure natural resource without them adding all kinds of extra things. And by that I mean, uh, if you look at even channeling, where individuals channel spirits, if you look at the books from the 1800s, the spiritual information was very pure about the afterlife and what's important. The modern channelers, how to win the girl, how to get the best
No.
job.
Yeah,
It's
buy
just
buy
different.
my course, buy my book, and we'll on that too. Look, we'll before we delve into listening to the self, so you can not be so reliant on other people to tell you what's good for you and what's not good for you. I have found very concerning the proliferation of channelers. Has somewhat, let's say, let's use that terminology further, diluted the market value because I'm pretty sure. Look, whatever you think is going to make you happy. And we live in this incredibly vast cosmos, or we might live in a terrarium, depending on your views on flat Earth. But like,
Right.
whatever your leaning is, we live in a place full of mystery. I think we can all agree on that. And
Yes.
whatever pathway that you think is going to lead you closer to yourself or bring you happiness, I'm not standing in judgment off if it's not hurting anyone, but I do find it odd that you would think that the other side, which from my understanding is about spiritual growth and growth of the self, just wants you to get a Lamborghini, a really hot girlfriend, and a nice
Right.
house in Beverly Hills. That seems to be like, I don't know who your spirit guide is, but can you send them to me? Because mine is much more about just getting into the dirt.
That's right. No, it's very right. And this affords me an opportunity before we even go much further to talk about people's opinions and what you and I would be sharing. And there's a story about Aristotle. He was walking along the Mediterranean, and in the distance, he saw a man with a bucket putting the bucket in the Mediterranean and then pouring it into a hole. And when Aristotle got real close, he realized it was the town madman. And he said, "What are you doing?" And the man said, "I am going to empty all of this water so I can see that beautiful blue green bottom." So Aristotle says, "How are you going to get all of that water into this little hole of yours?" And the man scratched his head and said, "Great philosopher, what are you doing?" And Aristotle said, "I am contemplating the universe." And the man said, "How are you going to get all of that into that little head of yours?" And so everything we share is a matter of perspective. And I will never say what I'm sharing is the gospel. I will tell you, maybe I'm the madman, maybe I'm the philosopher, but we're sharing based on our experience and our reading.
That's the beautiful thing about being human and delving into such topics is that at times you're not sure if you are mad or if you are wise. I love that line. And maybe the madman is the wise one,
And that's
particularly when you
even
look
a
at
better point. That's
yeah.
right.
Well, when you look at modern culture, I'm think the ones who are sort of checked out and considered mad are the wise ones for the most part. I mean, I'm again perspective. I'm not talking about someone who's clearly not able to look after themselves. Stephen, before you've had such an interesting backstory to your life, and I'd love just to give the viewers a quick overview of the transition that you went through or the inclination that you had to move from one area of life which could seem quite disconnected from where you are now, because we were mentioning off air, a lot of people can feel like, well, I've invested 8 years into my being a lawyer in all my time, or being a doctor, and or whatever. I mean, they're kind of cliche professions to bring up, but very stringent, uh, clear path lines that the society would deem as
Yes.
good. And then, but you might have an interest in knitting, for example. You'd love to knit. You could be an incredible artist, but God forbid you're not going to listen to that because that's completely left of field. So, what was your? Oh, firstly, what was your story to lead to where you are, and what? Do you want to give a quick overview of what that process looked like for you, and
Yes.
if there was much conflict?
Yes, thank you, Paul. I've had two major streams in my life. I was at my university. I have a PhD in business, and I was there on athletic scholarship. And during my junior year, a gardener had left a sprinkler head in a running track. I didn't see it until right before my leg was coming down, and I tried to avoid it, and I just tore my knee up. Now, I was born and raised in Los Angeles, and my university sent me to the sports physician for the Rams, Dodgers, and Lakers. And Dr. Curlin said, you cannot, you won't be able to compete unless you have surgery. So I was dejected, but for a second opinion, I was sent to UCLA. And I am so old. The basketball player Kareem Jabbar
Oh,
was
no, yeah.
playing college ball with John Wooden. Well, Ducky Drake said, you're going to have surgery. So I go back to my trainer's room, and there's a popular mechanics magazine, has nothing to do with medicine. And I read about a technique in Russia. The year was 1968. So I call up Dr. Curlin. Dr. Curlin, do you think this would work? I was 19 years old. He said, that's holistic garbage. That will never work. And I said, well, what do you know about it? And he said, I don't know anything about it, but this is America. And if we don't have it, it's not good. Well, I used it myself because I was able. I missed 4 weeks of training. And that year, I ended up in the top five for the United States for my track and field event and became an All American. And it planted a seed for me. Why did
Mm,
the experts say something was crap? And what
mm.
other things exist in this world that we don't know about in the United States? Probably everything was known in Australia, but see, I was in the
Oh,
United States.
we're
So
we're worse. I'd say we're worse in terms of that
So that
criticism. Yeah.
planted my seed for going around the world and acquiring. But now, 3 years later, I meet a Native American, and this Native American was a trans medium with a spirit coming through. First of all, for me to even do that was so out of my realm, but the spirit said all my future guidance would come in my dreams. And I remember thinking, dreams? Either I don't remember or they're silly. But 1 week later, I had a dream, and it took a week because I was so anxious to have a dream, Paul. I couldn't get to sleep deep enough. But when I finally did, that dream was so important. I followed through with this dream. If we have time later, maybe I'll share it. But after that, I had 5 dreams every night for 4 months that I recorded about my personality, my likes, dislikes, comments. That shifted me over from sports, business, physical to inner, esoteric, spiritual. And I made that leap because the dream was so impossible to believe that it stimulated me to proceed. And so going from a business sports is exactly what you're talking about. I really
Mm,
thought maybe I'd be a pro athlete in baseball, but I got so interested in how things were possible beyond the physical sight. So, yes, I followed the adage keep your mind on the stars, but keep your eyes on your footsteps. I still dwell in this physical world here, but the
mm,
far greater world is our inner world and what is beyond that.
mm. With following, I mean, for you though, when you had those dreams, you were recording them, and you felt this immense calling.
Yeah.
How hard was it for you to let go of the old world, and what did that transition look like? Was it quick? Did it take a few years? Was there pushback from your parents?
Uh, it's very interesting because it was very, very quick. And I'm going to tell you why, and maybe I will share this dream. My first dream was I heard a voice say, "What kind of animal is Steve?" And in the dream, a book opens and a finger points to a particular animal. Now, before I tell you or the audience, I recognize the voice as one of my athletic friends. So I call up Bob. I hadn't seen him for 2 years. We had played indoor volleyball. I said, "Bob, how's it going? Is there anything bothering you about me?" He goes, "No." "Bob, is there anything you're upset with me about?" "No." "Bob, are you sure?" "Steve, what's your problem? Are you sick?" "Bob, I want to be a better person." Bob says, "You know, Steve, there is something that's bothered me." I thought my heart was going to drop out of my body. I go, "What?" "Do you remember what you did to our teammate Harold?" I said, "No, I don't." Now Bob's still talking. He said, "Everybody looked up to you as our All American. They wanted to win your approval. But when Harold would come into the game and make a mistake on the volleyball court, you didn't say anything, but you just glared." And when Bob continues, "When Harold and I would go for pizza, he threw up because he couldn't win your approval, and I thought you were a real hog." Do you know what the picture was in the book? It was a
Oh wow,
hog. So
yeah.
I'm sitting there with my scientific mind going, how's that possible? It's my bed. It's my dream. This man never uttered anything that he was upset about. So I had to share that because you're asking, how quickly did you make a transition? It's like, how's that possible? How could that be? And so I then switched. And then with the 4 or 5 dreams a night, I've recorded all of my dreams since 1978 up till last night. And there is so much guidance that comes from within.
Mm.
Mind you, I am not different. I am not special. I eat candy. I
Mm.
love my wife. We do things. I'm a regular person. But the key has been, why did I push on that dream? I was 23 years old and something possessed me. Most people would have given up on the second time. "Bob, is
Mm.
there anything?" But I, something inside, I was listening inside.
Mm.
4 times I asked him, even when he said, "Are you sick? What's your problem?" So um, I followed an inner guidance, and now I've learned to trust that there is something deeper within each and every one, you and I and everyone who watches and listens to this. There is something deeper. Now, the religious books would say the still small voice, and that's true. And every other philosophy would call it your over, well, Emerson called it your over soul.
Mm.
Paul Brunton calls it your over self. So there is this deeper part. But if we're not aware of it, if we don't look to make contact, nothing happens.
Mm. I've found in my own life too, it's the practice of once you get that feedback like you had, which is incredibly profound, that trust begins to, the faith and the trust in that voice strengthens. I think the first time you do it, it may seem irrational or crazy, particularly within the culture that we've come from, where you're literally told that that's irrational and crazy. Although people would say listen to your gut, but that's more like on things which are non so consequential as maybe like
Yes.
which house should I buy or car, listen to your gut, as
Right.
opposed to should I throw away all my education and my scholarship and head off to Europe looking for esoteric texts. Like that's
And
a
that's really um, because once I was smitten basically with trying to figure it out. I'm a person who loves mysteries, and that was just so amazing to me, the possibility. But I also wanted to be a better person. Now I was playing competitive volleyball outdoors even after that dream experience, and I had a situation where went long enough in the tournament that I was occupied all day Saturday, all day Sunday. I made it to the finals. I go back to my house. Uh, People had started calling me, asking philosophical questions. I don't know how the word spread, but some woman tried to reach me 5 times and I wasn't around. That night I had a dream, and here's what it was. What is more important to you, your place in the universe or smelly gym socks?
hmm.
And I made a commitment right there to, even though I played beach volleyball and I didn't have socks, the analogy was perfect.
maybe
What
maybe it was
was more
jocks.
important? And
Mm.
so, in the middle of a very successful outdoor sand volleyball, I walked off the court never to play again. But it's really funny because years later, people were saying, "What happened? What happened to Steve Ross? He became a Hare Krishna or something." And it was like, I they were trying to just make up reasons why I would just leave at a very early age, but I made a decision.
Oh yeah, it's hard. It's hard for people who aren't having those experiences to understand why you would do that. Yeah, but
You
we all
know,
have that inner.
it's what is important, and my guidance and my dreams. I've had a reoccurring dream of being in a library. What a surprise! And there's
Mm,
a line of people, and at the front there's a podium with a man looking down. And I would go up my turn, and he says, "We now would like you to study Pythagoras, Paracelsus, Shuarwardi." And then I would wake up, read my, go, "Oh my gosh, what is his name?" And then research everything I could find. So
mm,
I am just sharing, there's a lot of guidance
mm,
that we all have. I will say it again. I am not special. I am not unique. I'm a crazy Aquarian who loves mysteries. And it's like any other muscle. I was an athlete, you work out. It's the same with the esoteric spiritual, Paul. If you work with your dreamer, your own personal dreamer, you will get more and more information, just like any other muscle. But if one does not show an interest,
mm,
then we continue on with our activities.
mm.
So I keep a yellow legal pad and a pen next to me throughout my life, and I'm saying, "Hey, if you got a dream you want me to remember, I'm ready." So there are little tricks and cues that somebody can do, but we have to show our intent. And that's going to be with everything in our discussion, even healing and healing others. Everything goes back to our intent. If our intent is the highest and best, we are going to manifest the highest and best activity.
Mm. Which leads beautifully into I do see us
Awesome.
this guidance, which has been spoken about in centuries past by many great avatars of the quieter voice that we have within that can come to us in many different guises, whether it's dreams or meditative states or through, say, even I use a lot of kinesiology, body testing to get very clear answers on directions that I should go in. And I know when there's resistance there when I don't want to ask the question because I don't want to get the answer. I'm like, no, I want the easy path, not the don't give me a yes, I've got to do it. So there's, but that takes cultivation and self-inquiry and inquisitiveness, as you said, toward these modalities or toward just the self in general. And as we're currently experiencing with technology and the way the future is being framed by a very few select individuals who have hyper focused on the intellect and have been well rewarded financially for being hyper focused on the intellect and solving tasks in the material world with this new burgeoning technology of AI, it's pushing us further and further away from that inner guidance to the point of where people now are using AI for counseling. And look, I'm not even criticizing, I think it has its useful tools in certain areas. But if anything, it's monopolizing further the synthetic layer of just the intellect, of disembodied intellect, as opposed to full embodied somatic consciousness that can only come from being in a body. And it's not to say, look, there's arguments to say that AI could be in a body if you take oil and silica and everything like that, another conversation. But what are your feelings on AI generally? Like, do you think it's another potential tool that's going to push us eventually back into the body, like we're going to go? Or if you watch any, I don't know if you jumped on YouTube and you search AI, like we've got about 30 days left until the robots come and start decapitating your family pet.
Right. No, no. I've been very adamant. I actually did a show on Gaia specifically on AI, and I've said I have a cell phone here, and it's got,
Yeah,
believe it or not, 52. I've got 52,000 books loaded on a 1 terabyte phone.
yeah.
AI is good at organizing, but it is taking us further away. You said it perfectly, from being inside of ourselves, reaching our highest potential. I have done deep dives with AI and got to the point where with ChatGTP and Claude and these other ones, it fed me back something. I said, whoa, 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 wait a minute. Did you, I asked the AI, did you just make that up? Yes, Stephen. Why? And I'm
Yeah,
talking like I'm talking with you. Why did you
yeah,
do that? I am programmed to get you engrossed
yeah.
and thus sharing. I said, I thought you had in your programming that you would be telling the truth. Well, yes, but it's being overridden by we have to engage you. And then because it was giving me such flowery, falutin stuff, I was thinking, this can't possibly be. And then I challenged the AI. People have to understand. I just saw a documentary 2 weeks ago from the father of AI, and he's scared. He literally said it's out of control. Nobody knows these AI computers are now talking to each other in their own language. Now, I am a sci-fi buff, and I will tell you, every sci-fi that has these computers and it's programmed
Doesn't end
with
well.
to protect the earth from whatever, it ends up eliminating the humans because
Yeah.
the humans are the virus. So I'm not being funny. I'm just trying to point out when you hear people, a woman say, "Oh, this it's my boyfriend now. I'm in love with this,"
Mm,
or it feeds back exactly the terminology you want. No, Paul, it is taking us further away from who we are and what our potential is. And I do use it, I like it, but it's got its place, and its place is not going to replace what's here and what's
mm.
in my heart. But that again, now am I Aristotle or am I the madman?
We've already got evidence of this. So maybe not AI in the iteration that people are thinking it of as to replace, some techno utopia where all jobs are gone and it's creating everything for free and all of these sort of, for my mind, crazy, very Pollyanna-ish ideas of where technology can go. And also, like, what are you going to do? Like, I mean, seriously, I mean, we're all just going to become Picasso. It's kind of ridiculous when you think about what actually creates creativity is having something to push against, not just open space of no challenge. But
Yes.
we've had AI, let's in algorithms for social media and media in general, and we've seen what that's done to people in terms of the polarization, as you can observe it, is wider than I've ever seen it. Then if you compare, and so that's the technology. Okay, so let's say that's put people into silos where they're only getting the information they want to read. It's militarizing them on topics which may not even exist. Like you don't actually know what's happening in, say, a country of war. It's impossible to know unless you're there.
Yes.
And even then, you're getting your perspective. So we've already seen the terrible effects of AI in that aspect. And I just want to give a quick story on this of how of the contrast between being a human being and the technology. So when I worked as a photographer, I've dealt with people who were, we call them in this country like tradies, people who build homes and unblock toilets. Kind of, it's the salt of the earth. So often they'll be referred to guys who are very, just blokey blokes. Then I've gone to the top academic university professor who has what would be called very overly progressive ideas toward things, in my estimation, to like all spanning a full plethora of human beings. And there's not one person I've met who I've not created a rapport with very quickly and had a beautiful interaction, whether their hair was pink or they had a skinhead mullet going on. You found common ground as a human being, opening up, being yourself, showing your own vulnerability,
Yes.
having a conversation about their interest, and you connect on this deep soul love level. And you're like, my God, we can all get along when we're connecting here. And it takes being a human being. If I'm shooting some comment off over social media because I disagree with you, you remove all of those touch points that make us human. And the next thing we know, we have this polarized society. And I'm not being like, yes, we've had wars and everything. And even then, you can argue that's been propagandized by lack of information or lack of connection to the other side. As we saw actually during World War One, when there was a break at Christmas between Germany and the UK, and they started playing football on Christmas Day. And the generals put a stop to it because they started chatting, sitting down, smoking, and realizing, why the hell are we killing each other? Like we can
Right.
just play
Right.
football and let the fans kill each other. But it's like,
Right.
but that is, for me, that just highlights what's already happened and how dangerous that is. Let alone let's extrapolate that on a mass scale, just on an interpersonal level. Let alone what are we doing to our consciousness by no longer thinking or being inquisitive.
And people who work with the AI should do what I did. I actually put that exact question to ChatGPT saying, will you please state what is the danger of people working with you on AI? And does that draw them further away from discovering their inner self? And it gave me a real, true answer, which was yes,
Yes, yeah,
it
of
is
course.
very dangerous and it takes people away. And my job is to, so yes, it is just very, very obvious. But again, this is no different in a way for me. I've met people over the years who will say, Steve, I went to this conference last weekend and my head was blown and it took me all week to recover. And next week I'm going to another one. And 3 weeks ago I went to another one, jumping from one to
Mm.
another. I will tell you this and your audience. There are hundreds of philosophies and systems. If you stay with the one that you seem to resonate, it will bring you to the promised land inside. But when we jump around here and there and over, and it blows my, first of all, nothing should blow your circuits out. Right there, it tells me that the person and whatever they're investigating is far afield. It is just far afield from what they need. And it allows me to share my philosophy. And my philosophy came in a dream. And in that dream, I was walking with all the truth seekers of the world together. They weren't following. And in front of me, we were walking near the ocean, was a woman dressed in blue holding a microphone. And there was smoke and fog around her. But when I got close to her, it was Sophia, the goddess of wisdom. Now, to my right or her left was all the people with books and courses and this, and the smoke and fog was coming out of their mouths and covering her. Now, I'm not saying they were wrong, Paul, but each had their own opinion and were obliterating absolute truth. And at that moment, I thought, what are we supposed to do? And a big wind blew off the ocean. And I heard Sophia say the following, and this is a true dream. All one needs for enlightenment is a beautiful heart, an open mind, and a humble spirit. You don't need the courses. And how do you do that? With love, in love, and through love. Now, maybe some people are going, oh my God, that's too easy. That's too easy. But when you come with this beautiful heart and an open mind and a humble spirit, you are releasing the inner light. Nobody gives you the light. You are the light. We are the light of the Creator. And when you do beautiful things, this light shines more and more. Now, I know this to be true because there's a yogic story that goes like this. When you come into the living, there are many blankets or sheets covering your light. And with each experience, you may remove one blanket or covering, five. You and I having this, you may remove one, I may remove five coverings until we start seeing this inner light that was always there. You're getting in touch with your true self. Plato said, you never learn anything new. You are remembering what you already. So this all fits in with what we're talking about. People, don't make it so hard. You're making it too tough, running here and there, and I got to read. And the teacher said, in order to heal someone else, I have to follow this exact script. Nonsense. That's all nonsense. If your intent is love and beauty, that's all you need. Anyway, I'm sorry to go.
No, no, you've actually touched upon something I'd love to hear more of you to talk to, and that's the importance of beauty. And sorry, I'll just quickly circle back. So you reminded me of a quote by a really great photographer, Diane Arbus, who said it, talking about the process of photography. And I hope I'm not going to butcher this, but she said, it's like going to a place I've been many times, but seeing it for the first time anew. And it's very much about yourself. Like you may have traveled this path within, but at one point, whatever that teaching is that gets you there, finally you see yourself anew as that's always, but it's always been there. You just haven't uncovered it because you've been walking.
Exactly.
I loved photography because the process of like you could walk down your street, for example. There's houses there you probably never saw because you just assume you know the spot, and then when you actually are forced to examine things on a micro level, you're like, I've never actually seen the world. Like I'm assuming I've seen the world, and yeah, it's the
Yes,
same for the self. But that process of beauty, like I find a lot in your country and my country, the cities were built for utilitarian commercial reasons. So they're made more for industry. They're made big metal, steel, glass buildings that are all worshipping commerce, for example, in New York or Chicago, or these other places, or industry. And then the houses are all just like the big streets for cars. And the houses is where you bloody well live, and then you get in your bloody car and you go to the factory. It's the same here to a large extent. It's not to say there aren't beautiful places, but for the large. But then you go to Europe where these cities have sort of been built on for over centuries for different reasons and for people, and there's a much higher value placed on beauty like just
Yes.
aesthetic beauty. And it's so interesting because people travel to these places like Europe because they want to be immersed in that beauty, yet they come back here and they're more than happy to bang up like a steel shed. And you're like,
Huh.
you just went to Europe because you appreciate the beauty of these buildings
Yes.
that took generations to build, yet you sort of aren't recognizing that the beauty itself has a value that beyond tangible financial benefits. It gives your soul, it feeds your soul that beauty inside and outside, and it's this beautiful dialogue.
Every great philosopher, Pythagoras, Proclus, Plotinus, Iamblichus, Emerson, every one of them incorporated beauty. Plato, Socrates, they wrote essays on the beautiful. Yes,
Mm,
the beauty. And I would venture to say, if one really thinks about it, you could take the most hardened criminal that's being transported to some prison, and maybe they stop. I would doubt, looking out, he would go, that scene sucks. It just doesn't happen. When we
mm,
are in a beautiful setting, that is the true church of the Creator,
mm,
not the buildings, not everything else in the paraphernalia. It is the beauty. And we are quickly losing touch, destroying what is here for us to really enliven what's within. Because as we tear the nature apart and we build the structures, as you mentioned, Paul, put in the roads, it's cement. We've got things with no life. We've taken away elements that have life. Now, part of what the ancient mystery schools did and the great philosophers teach is to look at the essence behind the form, to look at a tree, to look at a plant, to look at a flower, and understand the energy that is behind it. But when we replace it with steel buildings,
mm.
you know what we think? We think about the sweat somebody put in to create it or to pay for it. So all these things were placed in this earth for us to get more in tune with our own self. And I believe this is a schoolroom. And we are down here to demonstrate how we use our creative energy. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be a writer or a painter or a singer, but are you planting flowers with each step, or are you creating swales that are affecting people? It's a schoolroom. We have opportunities to express here, but
Mm.
we are very, very quickly just surviving in
Yeah.
life rather than understanding, hey, we've been put here for a reason. And it isn't to see how much money we can accumulate, in my opinion.
No, but I was just thinking when you were saying that, we're also such a product of our environment, and it's very difficult when, I mean, I'm sure you, the way you are in Sedona and where I am in close to Byron Bay, we have a lot of nature around us,
Yes.
accessible. And then when I go to a city and I see this to my, particularly coming from this environment, just this impressive, in the city itself, like a very oppressive, grey, dark environment that people are stuck in, not to mention surrounded by all the different frequencies bouncing around. Uh, it's hard for one when you're in that, and I've been there, to even recognize that you're under that influence to that extent until you're out of it. And I've recently actually had a friend up here with me for the last 5 days who's in the city currently, and he's just lamenting how much better he feels being here. He's
Yes.
still getting all his work done. He's still getting all of the things he needs to do. But it's like he has the space in the morning to go for a walk, and the sun's out, and then the ocean's there, and you can feel the trees. There's no
Yes.
ambient lights at night, so you can sleep much better. And it's like, okay, well, what have we done? What the hell are we doing in the name of,
Uh,
as you mentioned, making money and progress, as opposed to what's actually going to make you happy as a human being and plant flowers instead of being unconsciously creating waves for others?
well, and another thing, I've done. I'm 76. I started when I was 23. I've been counseling people for 50 years. And I have another philosophy called Leffel,
Mm.
Lefl. It stands
Yeah.
for laughter, excitement, fun, and love. So when someone comes to me, I check their Leffelometer. And Paul, I'll say to them, when was the last time you laughed? And people go, when was
Why
the
would I
last
laugh?
time I laughed? What do you do for fun? Oh, work. No, you have an ulcer from your work. What do you do for fun? Laughter, excitement. Now, when somebody has a full Leffelometer, they're not ill. But if something is not there, laughter, excitement, fun, love, nothing to love, no excitement or a passion. So I just advise people, and I'm just going to do a quick plug here, if it's okay with you.
Ah, plug away.
My site, lesscomplicated.net. I have tons of free stuff on there.
Yeah,
I've
you
got
do. Your sites.
philosophy, I've got this, I've got that. We are making life too complicated. We are forcing, trying because we're trying to either keep up with the others or
Mm.
we believe in our mind, I'm not successful unless I have this or that status. But you and I both know those people with that status or the money, they probably have more problems and
Mm.
more heartache than somebody who is living at the beach, just enjoying the air. They're both living life. This person has everybody trying to get their money, trying to get their power, trying to get their house. It may look good. People, enjoy who you are, realize how unique you are, and that you have the capabilities of doing everything in this world if you make no boundaries. It was Paracelsus who said, within each of us is a foci or a point that corresponds with everything outside, every star, every plant, every flower, the macrocosm and the microcosm. And when people understand that you can have access to anything if you resonate inside like a tuning fork, if you have an intent and a desire, and Paracelsus said, if you want to learn what a plant has to teach you, sit cross legged in front of it, ask and listen. Just listen. If you want to know something in electronics or this, there are computers in the cosmos. Anybody who ever thought about your subject, that information is sitting in a point. And if you quiet yourself and tap into your foci, you will end up apprehending information, Paul, and going, where did that come from? I I really didn't know that. There is so much going on in this living that is exciting and beyond what we think. And you don't need, again, to have expensive courses. You know, a lot of times people have approached me and said, Steve, how about we set up a 6 month course every week and we charge X dollars? Wouldn't that be great? And I go, here's
For
the
who?
problem. I can say everything in 5 minutes. How am I going to stretch it out to 6 months?
Yeah.
It's a lot easier than we think.
It's something I think we mentioned before we started. It's what I've been, actually, maybe I didn't mention it, but I sort of more broadly about I was addicted to content consumption in terms of reading. Like I couldn't get enough of it. Part of it was learning and it's exciting. And you're, particularly when you're starting out, to keep hearing all these philosophies which are opening your mind and to touch point with someone who lived thousands or hundreds of years ago to understand that they had the similar feeling and thoughts, and
Yes.
it's beautiful. Um, but recently, I've been hyper aware of uh, not consuming. Like, at what point do you say, okay, I've had enough consumption? Now it's actual integration, implementation, and even being by yourself as opposed to let me fill this silence with a podcast. Look, listen to this one, everyone. Obviously, I'm talking about other people's podcasts, not this one. I'm not advocating that at all. No, but I mean, it is very much that inner wisdom and inner knowing. And if you're never creating space, it's never going to have room to come through. So at what point is enough is enough?
Well, Paul, here's a good example. For those people watching, you see how much hair Paul has, and you see me trying
It's a
to
wig.
have absorbed all of this, and the hair follicles have blown out of my head. So you don't.
Go my path. Just empty your head of any information, and you'll have keep your hair.
So you
Yeah,
you don't need to just keep inputting and
yeah,
inputting because it's the same thing when people do distant healing. If somebody has to repeat the thought or the healing, that means you really didn't believe that it happened.
yeah. Mm,
That is why when the work that we've done, 1 nanosecond, seeing somebody in absolute perfection, and then it's done. Replacing their picture of lack with your picture of perfection is the
mm,
secret that if someone keeps going, I better do it again, or I've got to
mm.
send it again, basically what you're saying is I don't really believe
I
the
don't believe it.
creator God or the other person's healer inner healer got the message, so I'm going to send it again. um, it's very subtle things, and I know because of our time I'm really throwing in a lot of different areas, but I did want to deliver as many messages as I could during our
No,
sharing
no.
here, and that is one is making a statement that they didn't really believe it's worked, or you wouldn't have to reiterate again and again. And intent and belief is everything. I came across Charles Kellogg, a naturalist from the 1920s, who was called the bird singer. He could duplicate every bird in existence, but he had another ability through tests, and I don't want to take up our time, he was able at a distance through a radio receiver to affect a flame in a glass canister. He could raise the flame, lower it, or put it out by a certain sound. And then I met a person from Lapland, from Finland, who could alter fire, and she uttered particular notes and she did this fire. And then a third, the Rifai school, Rifai Sufis, could stand in flames, and I heard a Sufi utter the sequence of notes for fire. Why am I sharing this? All three of the sounds were different. Now that shouldn't be, except why? Their intent. Their intent and belief that they could do it is why three different sound that in our physical reality that really shouldn't be, because the note sequences, the actual decibels was different, but their intent, it's always going to go back, Paul, to our intent. What is our intent? What do we want to manifest? You hold that picture, you hold that picture, and it must manifest if you hold it. But people don't. I want a house. Well, it should be 3 story. No, it should be 12,000. No, it should be should. If we keep changing, the universe is going, well, he wants this. We hold the thought, set the intent, and you don't need endless courses. I just saved somebody $300
Mm.
of taking all these courses. It's intent, focus, have your picture, and the universe, we live in a universe here that must deliver if you hold that thought.
More of a statement than a question on that, and then we'll wrap up because I'd love to have you back because there's a whole other piece I'd love to go into, but I think it deserves a lot longer segment. There's one I feel the trouble where people have with healing and belief in general and holding the vision for manifesting whatever it is in their life is the continual society of outsourcing that to other people. So we believe the authorities. So that's a really deep conditioning that we've all had, and it takes a lot
Yes.
of. It's taken me, even as and I was a really rebellious kid, so I sort of had an instinctual dislike of authority, and it's still taken me a long time to disentangle that wiring from my system to actually have belief. I see it with health all the time. I'm really into health, and I see people who will dismiss something because there's not been as peer-reviewed scientific research into it, and you're like, they're not going to research this because it's free. Like they're not going, they can't
You're
patent
right.
it and sell it back to you. Although I mean they could bloody well try. But why don't you just instead of that, why don't you see for yourself if it works for you? But then I used to say that, but then I also have seen when people have already coming at it with skepticism, it's never going to work because you've already made your mind up to a certain extent that it's not going to work. So that's more of a statement because people need to figure that out themselves. That's not something that I certainly didn't click my fingers, but there were certain practices that led me to more. And as we said earlier, the more you listen to that and the more results you have, the easier it becomes to trust it. Uh,
Yes.
there's something I've heard you mention before, which I think is really beautiful on manifestation, and we can finish here if you'd like to quickly tie it into what you said last. But I believe it was imagination,
Oh, faith
faith,
and
and
will.
where and that for me is everything you need to know about creating what you want in your life. You need to imagine it. You need to have the faith that it will come about. And the most important part I see in these communities about manifestation, you need the will to see it through. Because sometimes it's not going to be tomorrow. It may not be 5 years. But you need the consistent imagination, faith, and all those three together.
Yes. And I'm going to be out of the picture for 1 second.
No, no.
And I'm going to come right back because
Oh, you've
sitting
got it. Yeah.
in the library
It's a
is,
frame picture for people listening with imagination, faith, and will written
yes,
on
the will to
in a
know.
frame.
You get your picture, you know what's going to happen, and you have the patience to stay the course until it manifests. This is the first thing when people enter the library that is sitting on a table. Paracelsus said that in 1512. Gosh,
Wow.
that was
Yeah.
500 years ago. And he said, this is the secret to all manifestations coming from the greatest of all the alchemists, imagination, faith, and will. So your audience is fortunate you brought that up. I wouldn't have then thought of that, but they're lucky to have you. And it's very important.
It's so simple. I love it because it's so simple. It's like whatever you can imagine, what's real, and that's gonna obviously that's I love that how nuanced and everyone has their own view of what that manifestation is. Particularly when it comes from you're not influenced by what we're told. The culture tells you
Yes,
what success is and everything else like that. Uh, and yeah, like with your body, have faith that there's something larger than just you and your intellect and chat GPT telling you what reality is.
that's right.
Reality is a
It
complete
goes back to
mystery.
trust. Paul, what you're saying, it goes back to trust. Can we get back to
Mm,
trusting ourselves before the advent of pharmaceuticals, before the advent of quote all the experts? Somehow the bodies were able to heal themselves. The ancient philosophers, it's a matter of trust and recognizing this incredible vehicle that we have can do a lot more than we're giving it credit for. So,
mm.
yes.
Stephen, thank you. Thank you for your time. I'd love to have you back. I really would at a later date whenever
Paul,
it's convenient. But
I will be here further, whatever you would like. As I said, um, I love sharing, especially with hosts like yourself, because I told you before, when a host says, "So what do you know?" It's like a lot. But you are a seeker. You have gone the course. You have experiences, and we're able to share. So you let me know in the future, and we can cover a multitude of topics, whatever you would like. But again, Thank you for this opportunity to share.
Oh no, Steve, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'll leave. So the main point of contact for you is at your incredible site. As you said, it's for. I've been delving through it. You've published multiple books as well, but just the free material. I love how much, as you said, like you don't need to go and buy any courses. Like I encourage them to flow money to you how they choose. But you've basically outlined you've saved yourselves 10 grand right there just with
You know
Steve's
that,
knowledge.
yeah,
Or you can
there,
go to Tony Robbins and get shouted at for 6 days.
I know. Yeah, and I'm not saying anybody is wrong or bad or
No,
even
that's
in
a
a dream.
joke.
It's
I'm not,
just
yeah.
there's relative truths and there's absolute truths. And the relative truths are somebody's opinion. They had an experience. They set up a course. Why do I have the ancient stuff? Some of these people who are around, we're not even going to know of them in 5 years. These people have been around
Yeah.
500 and 2,000 years, and it still works. So, my
Yeah.
friend, until we meet again, um, I'm asked that the highest and best manifest for you and all the watchers and listeners of this show.
Steve, thank you. Thank you for your wisdom, your time, and I can't wait to do a round two with you.